like a knee jerk, and I just shoved him with my foot, and I kicked him, and I kicked him back. And he fell back, and I said, oh my God, what's he going to do now? He gets up, and he comes really fast, right up to my face, just like an inch to my face, and I'll never forget those eyes, and I'll never forget that face being that close. He transmitted 100 thoughts, approximately, and 100 emotions in a second. If I can slow them down, they went just like this. Why did you kick me? You know you shouldn't kick me. It's bad to kick me. I could hurt you. I can do a lot of harm to you.
Kada govorimo o takozvanim otmicama ljudi, originalno preko 90% ljudi koji tvrde da su doživjeli bliske susrete s neljudskim bićima. Tvrdi da je do memorije ovim susretima došlo naknadno. Neki se ne bi sjećali ničega, neki su imali mutnu memoriju i bljeskove sjećanja za nešto što nisu bili ni sigurni da im se dogodilo. Neke ljude su proganjale noćne more i neobični snovi. I više od 90% ljudi koji bi se ohrabrili da dođu do odgovora to bi napravili na način da bi potražili stručnu pomoć u obliku psihološke pomoći, te bi zatim do svojih izgubljenih sjećanja djelomično dolazili putem regresivne hipnoze. Ali kao što vam je svima jako dobro poznato, hipnoza nije pouzdan način izvlačenja podataka i sjećanja. No postoji manjina i postoje ljudi koji tvrde da se sjećaju svega bez pomoći hipnoze, ljudi kojima iz nekog razloga nije obrisano sjećanje na ove traumatične susrete i takvi ljudi prepričavaju svoje priče u nikad viđenim detaljima. I danas govorimo o jednom takvom čovjeku kojem je sjećanje ostalo netaknuto. Dobrodošli na Balkan UFO kanal. Danas govorimo o Vincentu Sparaccinu, daleko poznatijem kao Jimmy Sparksu, rođen od talijanskih roditelja 1954. godine te odrastao u Floridi u SAD-u. Do 1988. godine u dobi od 34 godine imao je nezapažen i uobičajen život, rekli bi ništa posebno. Ali te godine počinje mu se događati nešto što će trajati narednih 19 godina. U dobi od 34 godine priča počinje na klasičan način. Ovaj čovjek tvrdi da je tjednima imao neobične životopisne snove, no zatim su ovi snovi iznenada postali jako realni. I to na tjednoj bazi. Nekoliko puta tjedno je počeo doživljavati takozvana, kako ih on zove, povlačenja iz ove realnosti. Drugim riječima, u svijetu ufologije počeo doživljavati otmice, to od strane klasičnih grejsa. No ono što razlikuje ovog čovjeka od većine drugih ljudi koji tvrde slične stvari je to što ovaj čovjek tvrdi da se sjeća gotovo svega. Sjeća se svih nevjerojatnih detalja jer njegovim sjećanjima iz jako dobrog razloga nisu manipulirali, a zašto? Pa saznaćete u nastavku ovog današnjeg videa. 89. godine izlazi u javnost i traži pomoć. Dolazi u kontakt sa Lindom Moulton Howe i John Mackom, koji su istraživali njegov slučaj te su postali uvjereni da ovaj čovjek govori istinu. Pisali su knjige o njegovom slučaju i Jim Spark je napisao jednu jedinu knjigu o svojim iskustvima pod nazivom Čuvari. Tijekom 90-ih je dao nekoliko intervjua, napravio nekoliko prezentacija i bio je aktivan koliko sam uspio pronaći sve do 2011. godine, od kad više ne istupa u javnost. Te živi mirnim životom, te koliko mi je poznato do sad, još uvijek je i živ. Ovaj čovjek je u nikad prije viđenim detaljima govorio o izvanzemaljskoj tehnologiji i načinu na koji funkcionira, govorio o njihovoj agendi i što ova bića rade ljudima na Zemlji. I koliko je meni poznato, jedan je od rijetkih uz Travis Waltona koji priča o ovakvim nevjerojatnim detaljima. Toliko detaljno da se stvarno morate zapitati, pa ako laže, savršen je lažljivac, jer imat ćete ga prilike danas čuti u detalje. Već nekoliko godina sam imao u planu obraditi ovu njegovu priču i bez problema bi je napravio iz priče onih klasičnih 20 plus minuta, no prije nekoliko tjedana išao sam ponovno pregledati njegovo svjedočanstvo da malo osvježim pamćenje, te sam ponovno preletio njegovu knjigu. I knjiga je fascinantna, stvarno je odlična, ali kada pišete knjigu, imate vremena ako izmišljate ovakve stvari da pišete o svakakvim izmišljenim detaljima. Ali stvar je u tome da ovaj čovjek uživo u svojim prezentacijama govori tečno o istim ovim detaljima. Ovo je jako teško raditi ako ste nekakav prosječan lažov. Jer lažovi u realnom vremenu moraju na licu mjesta ne samo izmišljati priču, nego se istovremeno prisjećati svega onoga što su već izmislili ranije. Mora se ukomponirati laž jer priča se naravno mora podudarati i laganje je naporan sport. Svi mi lažemo svaki dan, ali riječ je o banalnim stvarima, jako kratkim lažima. Treba održavati laž nekoliko sati u komadu, a da se ne zezne niti na jedan jedini detalj. Stoga je John Mack, a njegov rad izuzetno cijenim, bio uvjeren da ovaj čovjek govori istinu. Riječ o psihijatru koji je napravio stotine i stotine intervjua sa raznoraznim svjedocima. I što se tiče laži i lažova, daću vam i mali primjer da i sami provjerite. Inače se ne bavim ljudima za koje smatram da su očiti lažovi, ali nakon današnjeg videa odite pogledati ovaj intervju na Redacted YouTube kanalu. I navodni vojnik koji je govorio o svojim iskustvima unutar super tajnih programa. Ovaj čovjek u ovom intervju laže čim zine. Teška lažovčina koja je imala ogromnih problema u intervju gdje na kraju nije rekao ništa konkretno. A i mučio se sa ono malo detalja što je izmislio i slagao. Jedino što je bila istina u njegovom svjedočanstvu je to što je stvarno bio vojnik i upravo u tom dijelu ćete vidjeti koliko laže onim ostalim stvarima. Kada napravi prijelaz sa istine koja ide jako tečno i onoga što se stvarno doživjelo u vojsci, a riječ je o uobičajenim stvarima, i kada napravi prijelaz na ono fantastično i koliko se mučio kod ovakvih tvrdnji. I naravno ne mogu dokazati da ovaj čovjek stvarno lažov, ali intuicija mi vrišti na 100% da je teška lažovčina, pa usporedite njega s onim što ćete čuti danas. I planirao sam prevesti samo 5 minuta njegovog izlaganja čisto da steknete nekakav dojam, ali onda sam shvatio da je sve, doslovno je sve zanimljivo, sve o čemu govori. Stoga sam ubacio gotovo 90% prezentacije i 90% njegovog svjedočanstva. I ubacivat ću se i kasnije tokom videa gdje ću vam ispričati i još luđe detalje iz knjige o kojima nije ni govorio živo na ovom MUFON skupu 2007. godine. A i povezivat ćemo njegovu priču sa najnovim izjavama zviždača iz SAD-a, jer njegova priča koja je više od 30 godina stara poklapa se u gotovo svim detaljima koji do nas dolaze i dan danas iz vojnih izvora. Tako da udobno se zavalite, jer očito ovaj video danas će malo potrajati.
I'd like to start these things with why it's so difficult or nearly impossible in some cases for non-human intelligent beings, particularly the species that I'm associated with, which 95 to 98% of the 95 to 98% of the contact that I've had or interaction has been what are commonly referred to as grays. There are two types. One is a worker being, and the other is what I call a true alien. I would say that the majority of abductees' experiences have been with what they think are the aliens, which are the little 3-foot guys. Those are half biological, in my experience, and half robotic. They're literally programmed to obey and follow tasks. I don't think they have, well, in my experience, little to no self-awareness of what they are, and they just perform that way. And those are the ones that have the big giant teardrop eyes, the little thin mouths, and that are very small. In my experience, particularly, which they have been face-to-face, and memory is 95 to 98%, of what a gray is like, at least this particular species. They're about 1.5 feet taller. Their heads or their cranium are not nearly as large as the smaller ones or the worker beings, but they're bigger than ours. Their eyes are big, but they're bigger than ours, but not nearly as big as theirs also. And they do have a leather-like texture to their skin, and they pretty much look alike, but when you get pulled on a regular basis, you start noticing things that distinguish one from another, which is sort of like wrinkles. So primarily that's what I'll be talking about this evening, is those guys. But there's things in their nature that make it extremely difficult to, they're so far removed in a lot of ways, and there's other ways that they're similar. So I'm going to speak about the ways that makes it difficult for them not to knock on your door and say, gee, can I come in and have a cup of coffee? For starters, the thought process, the way they can assimilate data, process data, is anywhere from 10 to 100 times faster than us. So that can be rather intimidating. They are 100% telepathic. I've never heard one speak. But clearly, when there's communication, there's no mistake in it from, gee, I think I heard a voice in my head or something like that. It's loud and clear. In a lot of cases, it sounds like your own voice, but it's being manipulated from the telepathic communication, and it goes back and forth. What makes it very difficult to be around these guys is the fact, well, a number of things that I'm going to get into, is the fact that as a person, we have two sides to us in a sense. We have the you that's you know about, you intimately know about. There's things about yourself that you will never share with anybody unless perhaps you meet a significant other or somebody that you can trust and you start opening up to your past or maybe some of the things you've done and have or haven't been forgiven for or whatever makes you up. And then there's this face that we have, which is pretty normal, which that's what the public sees. And we don't allow people to penetrate past that unless we start to trust them. And that's the facade that we go around as human beings. When we all meet each other, this is the way we are until, you know, inevitably maybe we get closer. When these guys speak or communicate telepathically, they bypass that face. So everything is raw, everything is rough, everything is open, and everything is on the dissecting table. Anything that you've ever done from a child, clearly up to an adult that you may be ashamed of, and all the positive things that you've ever done. Everything is known. So that's a really uncomfortable feeling. So when you're dealing with something that can think 10 to 100 times faster, when you're dealing with something that you immediately yourself is exposed to, it's not a comfortable thing. However, if the human species is to evolve into the cosmic neighborhood, so to speak, or the galactic neighborhood is what I really meant to say, the cool thing about that kind of communication amongst advanced non-human beings or cultures, which there are several different species, is the fact that what keeps them from warring, so to speak, just a simple thing as that, is this ability to know what the other one's thinking at any given time is the advantage of no surprise attacks. So even if there's agendas that are not similar to whatever one may be, opposite of the other, no surprise attacks, so it keeps them at bay. Okay, now you have beings that have the ability to screen image, meaning that they take the path of least resistance. Abductions have been going on heavily here in the last 20, 30 years on a global basis, and there's different things that they do, emotional experiments, extract semen, extract ova, medical experiments, you name it. But screen imaging, meaning that they have the ability to transmit an image or an idea in your head, and then you believe that's that reality. When I mean the path of least resistance, when people are pulled, if you're the type that may be afraid of, let's say, demons or demonic things, then they'll portray themselves as being something dark or evil in order to get the whatever it is they're going to do so you'll cooperate, fear. If you're the type of person who is heavily believes in angelic beings and things of that nature and spirits and benevolent things, and then they'll come on that way too. So they do have an ability to screen image thoughts. Their technology, going into that, it's 100% thought activated. I've never seen it any other way, so I don't really see them with any hands-on projects. They have the ability to travel dimensions and use dimensions, meaning they can, their working essence can be 95% in another dimension that occupies the same space and the same time, and perhaps maybe only 5% of their other essence can be in our dimension, so they would be invisible. So they have the ability for invisibility. The ability for invisibility, that sounds pretty good. The ability to be invisible. If in some cases, I'm not saying this describes all ghosts and spirits and such, but they're not perfect. And if the technology messes up and then they appear, then you may see them as something that looks like a ghost. So whatever it takes, the path of least resistance not to be seen, but they have that ability. If they need to move physical objects, then perhaps to travel anywhere in the cosmos, in the universe, from point A to point B with little to no time passing. Now you have beings. Now, can you see why this makes it? They're very far removed in a sense, but then there's going to be similarities. You have beings now too that, fascinatingly enough, can travel time. Time travel to these guys is almost like pushing remote control. It doesn't make any difference to them anymore. It's almost like boring. You've got beings that have the ability to live tens of thousands of years. In some cases, some of those species don't even pass away at all. They can walk through walls, so they can manipulate matter. The laws of physics, as we understand it, don't apply. But what maintained my sanity throughout all the 19 years of all of this was the fact that I hated their guts, and it was pure. Pardon me? Yeah, I'll get into that in a second. Any chance I had to, as I would tell them, squeeze their fat heads off their skinny little necks, I would have done it. And I was paralyzed the first 6-7 years, and I'll get into that in a moment, how all this came about, or now I can share this stuff with you. But what makes it even more difficult with them is the fact that they radiate an energy that is literally not of this world. So it will make you miserable and uncomfortable. Your body is not used to sensing these things. Meaning that if they're 100 or 150 feet away, you'll sense something that makes you feel uncomfortable. If they're maybe, and don't quote me, I always say this, don't quote me on the exact footage, but let's say they're 50 or 60 feet away, your spine will start to straighten up, your breathing will become more rapid. If they get within 20 or 15 or 20 feet from you, then your heart will start racing like crazy. Then you're paralyzed. You won't even be able to move. Now, I'm not sure if that's natural or that's technically enhanced as a defense mechanism. So either way, they possess it. When they, and we're talking about this particular species of gray, when they're within a few feet of you, all the chemicals in your brain just dump into your body. Adrenaline, fear, love, caring, everything that guides our emotions and guides our senses dumps into your system, and so now you're just totally gone. And then when they're very close to you, typically you'll black out. So that makes it kind of hard for them to come on over and sit across the coffee table and sip on some coffee. Now, don't make me let this sound so scary, because human beings are resilient. We adapt. It took many months into the first 18 months, and inevitably you shake these things off to where you feel these weird sensations and you don't black out. But that's what it was like, particularly for me at first. So it makes it kind of hard to interact that way. Now, for myself personally, I never asked for any of this. Prior to 1988, as far as I was concerned, yeah, I thought UFOs were possible, and I figured you'd have to be, an idiot not to think that out of billions of stars, and then that many more times 3, 4, 5, or 10 planets rotating around these stars in the cosmos, that there wouldn't have one of these planets or several of them wouldn't house intelligent life. And I always figured, sure, it's possible, because there was so many videos and pictures of stuff of UFOs that, yeah, there are UFOs. But as far as abductions are concerned, and as far as on a global basis, into the millions, no, and particularly myself. Also, what I'm going to go over is how it started with me, and how the first 6-7 years were nothing but pure unadulterated hell with no frame of reference, total trauma. Then I'm going to share with you how it evolved in the second 6 to 7 years into something that I could understand, and then in the last 5, 6, 7 years, where it actually evolved to where I see a bigger picture, I see agenda, and I'm learning. But it took all those years for me to get to that point. It evolved to that degree.
Ako mi je palo na pamet, a znam da me nije, ako je ovo trajalo godinama, zašto ih nije pokušao snimiti ili fotografirati, jer očito je imao jako puno prilika. Stvar je u tome da prema njegovim riječima pokušavao i to više puta, ali da je ova bića, ako oni to ne žele, nemoguće snimiti i nemoguće fotografirati. Svi elektronički uređaji prestaju raditi u njihovoj prisutnosti. I oni su i sami svjesni da ih se pokušava snimati. Iako su strogi u ovom pogledu jer ne žele ostaviti za sobom nikakve fizičke dokaze jer prema njima ljudi uopće nisu spremni na ovakve stvari. Znam da ovo djeluje kao nekako prigodno objašnjenje. Eto, ja sam htio snimati video, ali nisam mogao. Ali kada vidite u koliko detalja govori o njihovim mentalnim moćima i stupnju razvoja njihove tehnologije, ovo me uopće ne čudi. A kako ova tehnologija djeluje na moderne uređaje, o tome smo govorili u ovom videu. I ovo nas uopće ne bi trebalo začuditi jer Trump je nedavno i to otvoreno govorio da su u Venezueli koristili posebno oružje s kojim su deaktivirali čitavu obranu Venezuele. Nikakvi uređaj, nikakvi radari, nikakav vojni odgovor nije radio, nijedna raketa nije ispaljena. Amerikanci su im pogasili čitave sustave, a ljudi i vojska na tlu je doživjela nevjerojatan nefizički napad energetskim oružjem koji je neutralizirao vojno osoblje. Neću danas dublje o onome o čemu je govorio Trump, ali moramo se zapitati otkud Amerikancima ovakve stvari. Jer ovakve stvari se godinama u prošlosti već opisuju u ufološkim slučajevima.
Also, I think it's important that I'm going to share with everybody this evening is a video. And how this video came about was the fact that the abduction that changed my whole view on these guys was a mass abduction where hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people were pulled all at the same time, and I saw something that they were doing. During this abduction experience, I had a more of an intimate interaction with one particular human being, one person. This person, his name is Doug Rodante. It's okay for me to say his name. When he was pulled, I stayed with this guy for almost 2 hours or maybe a little more than 2 hours during this mass abduction experience. It was the first time I was allowed freedom. It was the first time that I wasn't paralyzed. But this person was someone that was close to me during this whole thing. Several months later, I saw this person here, and then I'm going to go into that story. And this is an individual who had no real concern about the environment, had no real concern about things of that nature, but this mass abduction, things were planted in our heads, which I was 100% conscious of, and I know they do this on a global basis. And I got to watch how that flowered into this individual to be what he is today. And after I saw him for the first time, I never let on. I had to bite my tongue, and I'll go into that story. I never let on to I knew who he was, and then later on it all gelled. But however, for me, I guess I should tell you how it started. In mid-'88, I was having the same reoccurring dream. I consider myself to be normal, honest, logical, straightforward. And this dream that I was having was that something or some things was coming into my bedroom, escorted me off the bed, down the hallway, into the guest room. It was always the same thing. Walking me through the guest room window, which was a ground floor window. Of course, you know it's got to be a dream, at least in my mind it was. And into the woods. Then back across from the woods, back across our lawn, through the window, and back in bed. And this was happening several times a week, week after week, in the first couple of months. And then one particular evening, this dream became extremely vivid, meaning that I became conscious during the course of it, wide awake as like we're sitting here right now. When they escorted me into the guest bedroom, the normal part of this dream was to walk me through the window, and I was thinking, oh my God, how are we going to walk through this window? We walked through the window, they went out into the woods, I had no memory of what happened, and they walked me back the same way. On our lawn at that time, we had thousands of what I call honeysuckle flowers that would stick to the bottom of your feet. After that experience, when I got up in the morning, I went into the guest bedroom, and what I saw shocked me, and I knew something really strange was happening because you could see my footprints in the lawn, and embedded in the footprints you could see the heel embedded into the lawn on one side of the window, and then on the other side of the window, you could see my toes and the ball of my feet embedded into the carpet. However, the honeysuckle flowers were embedded into the carpet also. So as each footstep went further into the guest bedroom, you could see my footprints with the flowers stuck in them. And then also you could see tiny little feet, which were the little worker things, with flowers in those. So that freaked me out. I knew something weird was really going on. I took a vacuum cleaner, I vacuumed everything real good, and I told myself if I have that again, I'm going to go out there in that room, I'm going to make sure it's spotless, because it's impossible for these leaves or pieces of grass to get inside the room, because not only is it a glass window, but it has screens, it has drapes, it has blinds, and voila, here's all this stuff. Well, it happened again. Okay, then that was their way, that was their way of gradually letting them know that something weird was about to happen. And the next thing that took place was traumatic. I call, before I get into that, I call that method of transport going the easy way. That's when a craft is on the ground, and that's the hard way from point A to point B what was totally gut-wrenching. For me, the first thing you hear, you could be laying in bed or you can be sitting in the living room, whatever the case may be, is you start to hear this whirling, whipping sound inside your head at a low RPM.
Ovaj dio je posebno fascinantan jer opisuje takozvano povlačenje u, nazovimo to, drugu, to jest njihovu realnost. Ovo što opisuje ovaj čovjek je identično i to od A do Ž opisima ljudi koji su doživjeli lucidne snove i astralnu projekciju. Fizički opisi i senzacije su identični i početni strah je savršeno opisan. Imate osjećaj kad vam se to po prvi put događa kao da ćete doslovno umrijeti. I za one koji zanima puno više detalja o ovoj temi, pogledajte ovaj video. Jer ovo je očito glavni mehanizam takozvanog povlačenja u kojem netko drugi može izvući iz vaše realnosti, ali istrenirani pojedinci među vama ovo naravno mogu i sami raditi. To je ono o čemu je govorio i David Graš prije nekoliko godina, da i mi ljudi imamo ovakve sposobnosti prirodno, ali ih se namjerno suspendira od strane elita putem između ostalog i smeća od hrane koju jedete i načina života gdje smo izgubili doticaj sa ovakvim vrstama drugih realnosti.
It starts getting louder and louder and faster. The RPMs start to increase. The next thing that happens is you feel a sensation in the pit of your stomach, and it starts working its way up to your upper torso, and when it reaches your heart starts racing at like 1,000 miles an hour. Da, 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 da. So you think like, my God, I'm going to have a heart attack. The sound gets louder, the RPMs increase, your respiration increases even more, and then the next sensation is an acceleration. Only instead of feeling like you're being pulled up, you feel like you're being pulled down. And it's the best way I can describe it would be like you're going down a roller coaster only 100 times faster. Now you're paralyzed at that point, you can't see, you're screaming inside your head because you can't move your mouth, I don't want to die, I don't want to die, and then boom, you black out. When you come to, or when I became conscious, I was at point B. Now here's where point B was for this person for 6 years, at least. In this room, on board this craft, and I found myself in the same place every time for those first 6 years, sitting on this bench, and in front of this bench was a table, I call it a screen table, and it was artificial intelligence, and I think, and now we're talking almost 20 years ago, it was a teaching machine. It read you, it knew you, it got to know you. That was just the beginning of the fun. About 5 or 8 feet in front of that table was a wall which had a screen on it. I was paralyzed with the exception of the fact that I could move my head up and I could move my head down to see that screen on the screen table, and I could move my head up to see anything that was going on the screen on the wall, and my right hand and arm were resting up against the table and wrist where I can move my right forefinger as if you're doing something like an Etch-a-Sketch when you were a kid. And however, any mark or stroke I would make would either show up on that screen or it would on the screen table, or it would show up on that wall. Okay, now I don't know where I am. I don't know why I'm there. I'm almost completely paralyzed. And now here's their social skills. 0, the first thing that comes up was the block letter A. Next to the block letter A on this screen was a symbol that they wanted me to trace as an equivalency or to the block letter A. And so the first telepathic message from these guys, which was sketch the symbol for the A. And I just went, of course, like anybody else would, no. Why am I here? Why am I this? Screaming, yelling, boom. Vocal cords paralyzed. Sketch the symbol. No. Inside my head. And the basis of teaching in those early years were on punishment and reward. So when I would refuse to do it, the air pressure, and it would go like a thump, would increase in the room, and it would put pain in my ears, and they would go, trace the letter. And I would go, no. Then it would increase in levels until the pain was almost intolerable, and I stroked the first, or traced the first stroke to the symbol, and then all the things about the hard way happened, and I was back home.
Ovo je bilo po prvi put da sam čuo ovakve detalje o ovakvoj vrsti otmica u preko 90% slučajeva. Uglavnom se svodi na medicinske preglede nakon kojih se ljudi puštaju. Ali ovog čovjeka su navodno punih 6 godina, 6 od 19 godina, držali u takozvanoj izvanzemaljskoj školi, mala škola, gdje su ga učili osnove svog jezika i simbola uz brojeve. No učili su ga još nešto o čemu ne govori ovdje, ali spominje to u knjizi. Učili su ga osnovama telekineze, ali i vježbe s kojima je dobivao zadatke da svojim umom na ovakvom uređaju manipulira sa geometrijskim tijelima, poput kugle, kocke ili trokuta. A zašto su radili ovakve stvari? Pa vjerojatno iz razloga zašto mi radimo slične stvari životinjama u našim testovima i našim eksperimentima na Zemlji. I ovdje već na početku možete dobiti glavnu ideju zašto mu nisu brisali sjećanja na njihove susrete, jer ako koristite subjekta za ovakve vrste eksperimenata i nema baš nekakve logike da mu brišete sjećanje, jer očito ga morate zadržati za naredna testiranja. I ovakvom subjektu su očito potrebna prošla sjećanja. I prema njegovim riječima punih 6 godina na tjednoj bazi su trajala ova testiranja u kojima je pohvatao one osnovne stvari. I ovo vam je savršen primjer, kako on i sam kaže, zašto se s ovim bićima ne može jednostavno komunicirati. Sva njihova komunikacija prema njemu se svodila kao vaša komunikacija sa psom. Kratke riječi, naredbe i minimalne informacije.
Okay, that was my first fun experience with those guys. Now, I didn't know where I was. I didn't know why I was there. I didn't know what was going on. My wife thought I lost my mind. When I went to my friends, they said, Jim's a pretty normal, honest person, but I think he's lost it. At that time, I went to the church. I used to go to church a lot. When I went to the church with it, they said it was demonic, and then I'd sit there at church, and all the spaces and the seats would be empty next to me. And that's the way I was. And I was like telling people, you wouldn't believe what's going on. Anyway, my family figured I lost it. Now, this stuff went on for a period of 2 to 3 times a week, every week. Sometimes it would be, weeks would be 9 or 10 times a month, sometimes it would be 15 times a month, and that went on heavy like that the first 18 months. And every time I was pulled, I was sitting in that same stupid bench in that same stupid place, tracing block letters to a symbolic equivalency, and I thought this thing was an alien alphabet. It went from A to no Q's and no Z's. And then it went to a number system that was based on 6. Now, during all of this stuff, I just can't tell you, I can tell you how much the loathing, the hate, the focus of anger that I had, and all I wanted to do was kill these guys, because it's really started affecting me and my home life. Fortunately for me at that time in the business that I had a partnership, J&J Properties. It was North Carolina. So my partner was taking care of that part of the business. And then I had enough money to buffer me through these first 6-7 years, because I wasn't even able to do my work, or wasn't able even to do my business. It got to the point where I started losing. I lost something like 38 pounds. I wasn't, it made me so crazy that, of course, my wife, she disappeared after a while. God, imagine that. I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping. Fingernails were growing, and the best way I can describe myself is as it got into was I looked like Howard Hughes in his last days. Okay. So during the course of all of this, they extracted semen. During the course of all this, they did emotional experiments. During the course of this, they would do mental experiments. And all of this mess was based on punishment and reward. But when it came to the reward, when they would offer a reward after a good session, I always refused the rewards because, again, all I wanted to do was kill these guys. They're cold, they're non-emotional, and what was going on made no sense, and there was no rhyme or reason to it. I inevitably got to the point where I decided that I was going to kill an alien. There's no doubt about it, I was going to kill these guys. So what I didn't know was happening was a couple of things at that time. For starters, that converting block letters into an alien symbolic equivalency turned out to be one of the most fascinating things that one could ever experience, because they went through this meticulous detail on going through the motion, you had to sound it out, the direction and the motion was important. And after this alphabet thing was on one session, after I had gotten the A's all the way through the no Q's and Z's, they presented 50 pages of text on this screen. And it was a story about a friend of mine, and his name was Jerry. And it was written where I could read it. So I started, as I could read one page in regular writing, where Jerry was born and how he was raised and his likes and his dislikes, and as a toddler growing into puberty. And it went page after page after page. And then when it came to the point of the present, the story kept reading as if into the future. And so at the end of those 50 pages, I said, why are you doing this? What is your point with this? Da, da, da. I made up cuss words for these guys. Well, then, after I said that, they took on that screen and put about a paragraph, less than a half a page, of that symbolic stuff that they had converted, and I could read it real fast, and I got the whole story within a matter of a minute. And I went, wow. Okay, now, this took years to even get to the point as to why they were pulling this. Now, this got even better. They then came out with something that looked like the size of a 50-cent piece coin. And then it was like a shorthand version of these symbols, and they flashed the coin. It wasn't a coin, but it was round like that with the symbols in it. You look at it, and then you got the whole story in a split second. And I always like to describe it this way, I always like to describe it this way, which is, what's the latest and greatest movie going on right now? Just name a movie. So let's say you've never seen the movie. Now, if you've seen the movie Transformers, if you've seen Old Yeller, if you've seen Independence Day, in a matter of a few seconds, you can kind of see that movie in your head. That's the way, once the data is there. So they can present something like that much data on one coin, like Transformers, and immediately you would know the movie, you would know the emotions of it, you would know who the actors are, the theme, from the beginning to the end. So that's what that stuff was leading up to.
Evo i dijela o kojem nije govorio, ali se pojavljuje u knjizi. Ne samo da smo mu pokazivali ovakve stvari, u jednom trenutku na njegovo izričito inzistiranje koje je trajalo godinama, zašto baš on i zašto mu to rade. Odgovorili su mu da imaju pravo na to, da su ga oduvijek imali i uvijek će ga imati jer ljudi su njihovi. Te su mu ne riječima, jer komunikacija s njima je bila minimalna sve ove godine, putem jedne od projekcija su mu prikazali cijelu njegovu obiteljsku lozu. Te su mu počeli prikazivati njegove predake kroz razna povijesna razdoblja, vraćajući se duboko u prošlost. I to sve do primitivnih majmunolikih bića i prvih primitivnih ljudi s kojima su započeli svoja testiranja. A riječ je o stotinama i stotinama tisuća godina u prošlosti, te da on nije jedini pojedinac čiji se razvoj prati. Riječ je o milijunima i milijunima ljudi na ovom planetu.
So there was a couple of things that led to an experience that, I should mention this too, what was going on in those days. I also figured in those early months, and particularly within those first 18 months, as being the biggest hell of the 6 years of me trying to avoid these guys or to get away from these beings. For example, I would go to major cities, and I would go downtown, and I would check out a hotel that was 15, 20 stories, and I'd get in the middle of it thinking they couldn't pull me. They would pull me. I would drive hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles from state to state to state to try and get away from these guys. They would pull me. So there was really no escaping. To inevitably, it came to the point where I abandoned my home in Texas, and I went down to Fort Myers Beach, Florida, which was a sterile island where I grew up, to see if I can get away from them that way, and of course, no, they still pulled me. So I was doing everything I could to get away, and in my heart, mind, and soul, all I ever wanted to do was kill them. Okay, so this alphabet developed into something interesting, because I also know that it's the basic foundation for also telepathic communication. So there's a lot of fascinating things about that alphabet that was force learned into me. Still seeing no real rhyme or reason. I felt a little better about understanding something at that point, but I still wanted to get rid of these guys. So certain events led to my newfound freedom with them, which took about 6 years, between 6 and 7 years, which was two stories that I'm going to share with you that took place that led to that. One was, there they pulled me. I was in the same stupid place, sitting in the same stupid bench. But this time there was on the table, the screen table, there was an ant, at least an inch or maybe an inch and a half long, a rather large ant. Clearly you could see it. And you could see that they created some kind of field, like a circle, where the ant was trying to walk, but like he would bump into something, but it was invisible, as if somebody stuck a jar on top of it. And then the instructions were to sketch the symbol for kill, and the ant would die, which was something like that, which was that. And so I said, no, I'm not killing nothing for you. And then again, sketch the symbol for kill. I said no. The air pressure increased in the room, the pain in my ears. And they kept going level after level after level, and I was taking more pain than I ever did, and I just went, no, I'm not going to do it. And then they projected a hologram of my brother, and it looked like he was in a hospital, in the bed, clutching his heart as if he was having some kind of a heart attack. So now the message was, if you don't sketch this, harm is going to come to your family. So I then didn't want that to happen, so I sketched the symbol for kill. The ant balled up and died. And then I wept. And I'm going, why are you guys doing this to me? What is the point behind all of this? What I didn't realize was they were about to turn me loose, and they were using different methods to see how far I would be pushed if I would actually kill these guys. In other words, if I was free, would I kill them and tear up the ship, bottom line? But again, they didn't give me any warning. After that event, that's when I was dead lock stock to kill one. And during the course of all of this, these things would come into my home, walk around the house as if to observe the laboratory rat's natural environment. So if you can imagine yourself sitting in the sofa, here these things come through the wall, they're walking around, they do whatever they do while all this stuff is going on board. So I went to the gun shop, and I bought a .357 Magnum. And now imagine a guy that looks like the last days of Howard Hughes going into a gun shop buying a .357 Magnum. Yeah, there shouldn't be any gun laws. I'm okay. All right, and so I buy this pistol, and then I stop at the liquor store, and I bought a fifth of vodka. And because I'm going to kill one of these guys, right? So I got to drink my courage. So I go back to my place, and I'm sitting on the easy chair, and I've got the gun in one hand, and I got the vodka in the other, and I'm just drinking the vodka. And that was an evening where they had decided to do a home visit, and I could hear the noise on the roof and in the attic, so I knew that would start that. And two of them came through, and were walking around in the house, and one walked in front of me as I'm sitting on the easy chair. He faced me, and he turned his back, and he started fumbling with the television set. So I took the pistol, and I cocked it right to the back of his head. And I took a sip of the vodka again, and I took the pistol, and I cocked it right to the back of his head. And I said, and I would yell lots of neat things out at these guys. I said, you come a godzillion miles. You're so smart with all this tech. You think you're so smart with your technology, and you're so stupid you can't even turn on a TV, and I'm going to kill you. And I pointed that pistol, and I could not pull that trigger. I could not make myself do it. I put the gun down, and he turned around and telepathically said, we know you're not a killer. And so now here I go, bawling and crying again. Here's this grown man, you know, like, I don't understand what's wrong with me, and why don't I kill one of these guys? So then there was something that led, see, what this led up to was an experience which turned up the whole situation around with interaction with these things, and I started to see something. Now, there was another thing that led up to that point, and then I'll get into that story, which was things started changing when I would get abducted. Now, you must know that during every abduction, we have to extract semen. Okay, we have to do that. That's a must. So, however, on one particular occasion, I was on a gurney, and what they would do to screen image that scenario would be to, but I was laying on the gurney, but I had some ability to move, which was rather rare. And what they would do as a screen image to make you comfortable when they would do that procedure. And in this case, I felt like I was laying on a bed. I was leaning up on like one of those Instamatics, I guess they call them, whatever they're called, Craftomatics, whatever you're, not dubbing the name for a company, but you would be like at a 45-degree angle. And then into the room come two very attractive women. Gee, they don't do screaming imaging because these girls looked exactly like what I would think would be perfect or anybody else would be. So here they come walking into the room, and I'm laying on this gurney, and one of them starts playing with my hair, and the other one says, "Oh, gee, my, isn't he handsome?" Well, I knew that was a lie, and I shook off that screen image, and when I shook it off, the women went blink, blink, disappeared, and here I was on this metal gurney. There was a worker beam on my right, there was a worker beam on my left, there was a gray, which had this apparatus on my groin, and I responded by...
Kod ovakvih vrsta otmica postoji onaj medicinski aspekt pregleda, kod kojih je uvijek uključena seksualna komponenta. Mnogim ljudima je neugodno pričati o ovakvim stvarima, ali postoji ogroman broj slučajeva i svjedočanstava koji uključuju ovakvu seksualnu komponentu. Imamo nekoliko jako ozbiljnih primjera o kojima smo već govorili. U svojim eksperimentima, osim što su uzimali muške i ženske spolne stanice kojima su kasnije manipulirali, a vidjet ćete uskoro i kako. Često bi ovakvim ljudima ili putem stvarnih fizičkih hibrida ili mentalnih projekcija inicirali seksualni kontakt i naravno spolni odnos. Ta ljudska komponenta ih jako zanima i vjerojatno je riječ o eksperimentu u kojima su pokušavali stvoriti, nazovimo to, prirodno začeće. Jer iako su sposobni za stvaranje hibrida i bića od nule, vjerojatno je riječ o eksperimentima sa prirodnim biološkim procesima. Jer u jednom susretu, o čemu ne govori u ovom današnjem videu, ali govori o tome u knjizi, predstavili su mu njegovo dijete koje inače izgledalo ovako. Skica dolazi kao i sve druge skice direktno iz knjige i situacije u kojoj su mu pokazali njegovo hibridno dijete. I za vas koji inače ne pratite toliko detaljno ove teme, stvarno nećete vjerovati u koliko slučajeva se pojavljuju identične priče. E sad, zašto rade ovakve stvari? Pa doćemo do toga nešto kasnije.
Like a knee jerk, and I just shoved him with my foot, and I kicked him back. And he fell back, and I said, "Oh my God, what's he going to do now?" He gets up, and he comes really fast, right up to my face, just like an inch to my face, and I'll never forget those eyes, and I'll never forget that face being that close. He transmitted 100 thoughts, approximately, and 100 emotions in a second. If I can slow them down, they went just like this. Why did you kick me? You know you shouldn't kick me. It's bad to kick me. I could hurt you. I can do a lot of harm to you. You shouldn't kick me. And so, and you get all the emotions of each one of those things, only he did it within a second, and it just went, and I couldn't handle all of that, and I just passed out. Okay, so now I'm getting a little mobility on board, and what's the first thing I do? I kick them. Okay. Now, I get another abduction where this one was extremely unusual, and all this is in that towards the end. It's not like when you're on an aircraft. The air is fresh when you first get pulled in the room, and then they'll let it stay, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 minutes until it gets warm, moist, and hard to breathe, and then fresh air will come in. So like every 20 to 40 minutes like that, you get a blast of fresh air. So it's not constantly circulating. But anyway, I'm in this crummy room, and I'm leaning there, and I'm thinking, well, okay, what am I supposed to do? I can move around. Should I stay? Should I walk? Should I check things out? So I chose to walk towards the corridor that they always come in. And I walked slowly to the corridor. And when I got there, I looked to my right, which was another wall, and I looked to my left, and then the corridor was thin and narrow, and it went down, I guess, 20, 25 feet. And then I took my breath, and I made a left, and I walked down the corridor. And then I saw an opening to the right, so there's no doors, just openings. And so when I got to that opening and I looked inside, there were rows of gurneys with these beans on them. I don't know if they were robotic beans. I don't know what they were. They just scared the doo-doo out of me because they were laying on their back. They had sheets, something that looked like sheets on them, and as if they were turned off, and they were just staring into the ceiling like this. So I immediately screamed and yelled out, "Oh my God, they're dead, they're dead, they're dead." Panic, they're dead. And what I forgot to mention last night, which was an interesting aspect of this. Remember me saying earlier that you can sense their presence because they radiate this energy? Also, I should mention, which is pretty cool, is that whatever rank, if there's a sense of rank and file, so to speak, in grays, and also a sense of whether you're a manager or whether you're a president, so to speak, your significance, is you sense that energy as they get closer, and it's more powerful. So instead of having a name, you can sense the essence of this energy that makes you miserable to know how much one may be a supervisory being. So a strong one came from behind because I can sense him coming, and I'm screaming and yelling, "They're dead, they're dead." And I can feel him come over, or the energy come over to the back of my head, and all of a sudden it's a screen image. And now here's, instead of these beings staring into the ceiling, it was all girls with blonde hair and red lipstick. And all of them at the same time said, "We're not dead," all right, in my mind, and I blacked out. Okay, so now I'm thinking, so now I'm starting to have these sensations of a turnaround. I saw something with this alphabet, I'm getting a little movement, but I blew it. The first time they let me have movement, I kick one. The first time they show me their handiwork, which they're proud of, I panic. So now I'm thinking that, are they going to abduct me anymore? Did I fail? And I always forget this. I did this last night. What's not the Helsinki syndrome? What's that thing called when you're Stockholm? I don't know why that doesn't sync. Maybe they don't want me to have that one. I don't know. But it's like the Stockholm thing, like you're a trustee or something. So I'm starting to see movement and stuff like that. I should mention before these last two events that I did wake up one morning and I looked at myself in the mirror like that Howard Hughes guy, and I decided at that point that there was nothing I can do. Look what you're doing to yourself, Jim. You can't even wear your clothes anymore. You look like hell. And I bathed and I shaved and started eating again. So I decided there was nothing I could do about this. And even before my newfound freedom with these guys, I got myself back in shape again. Figured that was nothing I can do, and that's it. And I certainly didn't try to kill them. Didn't do any of that. So anyhow, I thought for weeks went by, and it was a long, extended period of time that went into a month, and then another month went by. I'm thinking, my God, after all of these years of this junk, they're not going to come back because I blew it. And that's what led to probably the most, one of the most astounding and notable abduction experiences where I started to see a pretty big picture. I got pulled. And I found myself in a clearing in the woods. I would say the clearing was about 100 yards, like the size of a football field. I was standing up, and below me was, and I had free and total movement. Below me was about 12 or 15 people just sprawled all over the ground. They were in their night clothes or nude, so you could see that they were pulled. I use the term pulled instead of abducted a lot, so meaning taking you from point A to point B. You could see they were pulled from their homes or in their bedrooms. There was a guy standing up to my right who had a movement, and this is the guy I'm talking about, which we're going to see in the video. His name is Doug. He was fully dressed, and he was just going, I was driving in my car, I was driving in my car. So all he knew is that he was driving his car, he was there, and these people that were on the ground were mostly paralyzed, and there was a blonde-haired woman sitting in the fetal position, rocking back and forth in a panic state, so she could partially move. To the left of her, that group was another pile of people, about 12 or 15 of them, and then to the left of that pile was another pile of people, just sprawl out on the ground. So here's 3 piles of people, and in each pile was a gray. And I'm standing there with full movement. It was an overcast night. I'm looking around. I could see that the pine trees were similar to the pine trees that we have in south central Florida. And the telepathic message comes to me, which is, calm them. So now I'm thinking, oh my God, I got free mobility here. What is this? I got a job now? And again, it's that Stockholm thing where you don't want to be sitting at that stupid bench going through that drill. So I went over to the guy and I said, hey man, look, you're going to be okay. I know you're nauseous. I know you're sick. I said, this sensation will pass. You'll be fine, because he's the one that was saying, I'll drive my car, I'll drive my car. He was standing next to me, and I'm looking at this guy's face, and I'm getting every detail of this person. Then I go over to the girl that was on the ground, and I put my hand on her shoulder, and I tell her, I say, you're going to be fine. They're going to take you on board this craft. They're going to put you in this room. They're going to teach you this alphabet, you know, and I start going into the hell, right? And so then this things I shouldn't be saying, and it wasn't making her feel better. And this this telepathic voice, again from the gray, says, you're telling her too much, just calm her. And so I said, oh, you're going to be fine, these feelings pass and all of that. Then I started hearing moaning and groaning from these people that were on the ground, as if they knew something was going to happen. And to my left, in the horizon, were 3 balls of light. And I always describe them the same way. Anytime I lecture or talk about it, it's the same thing. They looked like those million candle lights that you do when you advertise a car lot or, you know, a new shopping center or something like that, because it was an overcast evening. 3 balls of light, and out of nowhere, one of them just went zoop across the sky, right on top of our pile of people, above the clouds. The second one went over fast from the horizon over the second group of pile of people, and the third one hung over the third pile of people. The one that where I was standing, I was looking up because I could see the glow of the light, but I couldn't make out what it was. And then it started descending from the clouds. And I saw what I thought and felt was the most majestic, spectacular, phenomenal sight of my life. I mean, it had my heart beating like with excitement. It didn't look like I thought a UFO should look like. I figured those things would be more aerodynamic, and you know, and it looked kind of like unaerodynamic. But nonetheless, it was spherical. It did have a dome on the top, but the bottom of it was like egg-shelled. And then I could see windows around that eggshell part, and I can see the silhouette of beings scurrying around. Then this bright, bright white light emanated from that eggshell-looking thing over our group of people and myself with a hue of blue. And it was just simply beautiful. So I started walking forward, and I had my hands up in the air, and I was going, it's beautiful, it's beautiful. And then another one came over, the one that was over the second group descended from the clouds and that light came down. And then the third one did the same thing. So when I was standing there and seeing these three things and I was so taken by it, I was just yelling out, "They're beautiful, they're beautiful." And then it was just simply beautiful. So I started walking forward and I had my hands up in the air and I was going, "It's beautiful, it's beautiful." And then another one came over, the one that was over the second group descended from the clouds and that light came down. And then the third one did the same thing. So when I was standing there and seeing these three things and I was so taken by it, I was just yelling out, "They're beautiful, they're beautiful." And then something occurred to my mind to do the little symbol thing that I learned, a symbol for high. I'm so, with it. So I do a thing for high, and as soon as I did that instantly, which was like this, I blacked out. When I came to, I found myself in this corridor with all these people that were all sprawled on the ground. They were all standing up, and they looked like zombies. And you could tell they were paralyzed, but they could move, and they were totally unaware of that they were there. They were just staring out. And then the telepathic message was, lead them. And I thought to myself, and people have heard me say this, well, what, lead them to slaughter? What do you want me to do? And so, but I knew inherently it wasn't that. So I started walking forward. Pretty good corridor, and as I took a step, they took steps. If I stopped, they stopped. Now I got a job now. Remember, this is a big deal to me. So now this thing opens up to this huge room that looked like a gymnasium. Now what was fascinating about that thing was the fact that it was scurrying with activity. I could see military individuals, I could see other human beings and grays all across the back of this gymnasium thing working something. So now I'm seeing humans, now I'm seeing military personnel, now I'm seeing grays, and rows and rows and rows and rows of monitors.
Evo još jednog specifičnog dijela. U svojim otmicama više puta je viđao i ljude, znači ljude zajedno s ovim bićima. Nekakve doktore, znanstvenike u kutama i vojnike. Ovo su glavni argumenti za teorije doktora Stevena Greera koji je otišao u drugu krajnost i koji tvrdi da izvanzemaljci ne vrše otmice, nego ljudi vrše ove otmice koji putem raznoraznih droga ali raznoraznih tehnologija koji izazivaju halucinacije predstavljaju izvanzemaljce u lošem svjetlu, te na ovakav način prikrivaju ljudsko negativno djelovanje. O ovome sam govorio u ovom videu, ali ja osobno ne mislim da je samo riječ o tome. Postoji stvarna mogućnost da ljudi zaista surađuju s ovakvim bićima, ali također postoji mogućnost o kojoj govori Jim Sparks koji je vidio mogućnosti njihove tehnologije da su ovo samo projekcije. Što ovo sve znači? Pa recimo ako ste ogroman vjernik i ova bića vas otmu, to jest povuku, da smanje vaš strah i povećaju suradnju i smanje vaš otpor. Putem ovakve svoje tehnologije rade mentalne projekcije u kojima vam prikazuju anđele, prikazuju vam nekakva božanska bića, ponekad Isusa Krista, ili neke druge religijske ličnosti ovisno o vašoj religiji. Vi doživite nekako prekrasno iskustvo koje učvrsti vašu vjeru, oni ugase vaš otpor. Na isti način vas se može ustrašiti sa mentalnim projekcijama sa demonima, vragovima i drugim negativnim entitetima i mentalne projekcije prilagođavaju dobu u kojem ljudi žive. Znači neće nekakvom plemenu u Africi prikazivati djevicu Mariju, nego nekakav njihov ekvivalent. Ako je vaše uvjerenje recimo racionalno i bazirano na autoritetu drugih vrsta i niste vjernik, ali volite znanost i znanstveno ste orijentirani gdje na vas ne djeluje ovakve stvari kao na nekakvog prosječnog vjernika, onda ćete ovakvim mentalnim projekcijama dobiti znanstvenike, dobit ćete doktore i dobit ćete vojne autoritete oko vas. Ne bi li se na ovakav način dobila vaša poslušnost?
Then the next telepathic command was, seat them. So now, this guy, I should mention, which I forgot to mention earlier, his name is Doug, he was with me in the corridor and his hand was resting on top of my hand. So for whatever reason, I had a lot of contact with this individual, even to the point where his hand was resting on it. So when I was leading the others into that into the other room, he was holding on to the top of my hand. So naturally, he's standing next to me. So I walked him down one of those aisles where these monitors were. And I got to the end, and I sat him in something akin to the bench that I was, but it wasn't the same setup, before this monitor. And I started walking back, and when I got about halfway through this aisle, curiosity got the best of me, so I started looking around. I wanted to see more. I saw more human beings, and it was just phenomenal to me to go from 6 years of that hell to seeing this going on, still not knowing what's about to take place. And then as I was standing there, the telepathic voice went, no. One word commands like you do your dog or something like that. No, in other words, don't look around. And I kept looking around. I couldn't help myself. And the thoughts were going through my mind, maybe I'll blow it. Maybe they won't let me do this no more. I wanted to see this. I wanted to see that. No. So after the second no, boom, I blacked out. When I regained consciousness, I was sitting in front of this, my monitor, and there were nothing but hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people sitting in front of monitors also. They either had a line that was hooked into their forearms, the back of their forearms, or the bottom of their forearms, which I think can explain in a sense what scoop marks are put in there, and then some of them had lines in their calves, the back, up behind your shin, yeah, your calf. And what I learned that to be, which I'm pretty certain what that was about, was we were all about to get an environmental lesson in this mass abduction, which has been going on a global basis. And also different things that you can do, which I'm going to get into that in a second. What these tubes were that were stuck in us, I believe, were something to heighten the emotions to an extreme, meaning that all these monitors all lit up at the same time. And you could tell, and I always describe it this way, like at a television shop when you see like 50 TVs and they all go on at the same time, that glow in the room, all of that's the same. So all these monitors light up at the same time, and there's a scene appears. The first scene that shows up was an Earth, they're all Earth scenes, was the ocean. It was a beautiful, drop-dead gorgeous, turquoise blue, fresh, teeming with fish, and you could see the sky was crystal clear. And with whatever they had hooked into us and the way the colors were coming through on this site, you just went, oh my God. It just took your breath away. You're going, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. It just overwhelmed you with the pristine beauty of the planet. And you knew when you were watching that, and all of us were watching that this was a time period before we kind of messed things up environmentally. And then there was a hum, like, and then 3 seconds would go by, then you'd hear the hum again, and then another scene would appear, and that scene was like a mountain scene, and it had snow on top of the mountains, and beautiful, healthy trees, and again, the sky was crystal clear, and you're just going, God, it's so gorgeous, it's gorgeous. You just got into it. And then it was one beautiful earth scene after the other, after the other, after the other, and then they slowly started getting ugly, where the beautiful ocean was a mousy, nasty brown. The fish were bloated and floating in the water. The air was, or the sky was a nasty color, and you were just going, oh God, no, I don't want to see that. And each scene got uglier and uglier. And then the telepathic voice in everybody's head, all at the same time as these scenes were getting uglier, were, you're killing your planet. Your planet is dying. You're killing your planet. Your planet is dying. So they let us see all this wondrous beauty of what it was like, and then did a reverse emotional thing with whatever was hooked up us, and you're just like, oh my God, I can't take this. And I didn't want to take it, so I saw on the bottom left-hand side of my monitor symbols that were part of a filing system for these scenes. So I didn't want to look at that, so I kept looking at those to see if I can decipher it. And then the sound no came into my head, and on my screen was an N and an O. It wasn't even the alien symbolic form of no. No, And then I kept looking at it, no, and it kept appearing, and I blacked out. So anyway, when I came to, now this is like 12 years ago, so these things have really evolved in some pretty neat stuff, but this is where it went from 6 years of hell to something that started making sense. When I came to, I found myself in or regained consciousness, I found myself in something akin to a gymnasium, where all these people that were sprawled on the ground, who were in this room with the environmental thing, were all nude. Their clothes were sprawled all over the place. And here's this guy again, and he's going, oh God, my arm, where it was bothering him that he had this hole in his arm, like what would be referred to as a scoop mark, I guess you'd say. Other people were grabbing their calves and going, oh, my leg. And it smelled in there. And it smelled just like a stinky locker room. So I could tell that they used this thing over and over and over and over and didn't clean it, okay? Clothes were sprawled all over the place, so nothing was like neatly stacked for whatever little clothes that they had when they were picked up. And then the command was calm them again. So I went up to this guy again. I said, hey, look, don't worry about that cut on your arm. These things go away fast. They heal quick. You know, it'll just be like a little sore when you get home. And I was saying this to this girl. And then kind of a funny thing happened, which was everybody got this at the same time. Nobody leaves until you find your exact clothes. And then you never seen people who were moaning and groaning and jump up real fast, scurrying all over the place, finding this stuff. Now, during abduction scenarios, almost everybody will get the memory taken away from them. So even though they're behaving kind of normally and reacting to things, when they get back, they take it away. So that was the beginning of where I started seeing something that they were doing.
Ovdje dolazimo do njihove glavne poruke i zašto rade to što rade ljudima. U ogromnom broju slučajeva postoji ta, nazovimo to, ekološka komponenta. Od djece u Zimbabveu u kojima su mentalno prikazivali umiruću zemlju, pa do Puerto Rika i Amauri Rivere koji je zajedno sa drugom skupinom ljudi vidio kraj svijeta, pa sve do Gene Sparksa. Ovaj slučaj sa Riverom je poprilično sličan ovom današnjem slučaju. Uvijek imaju ovu identičnu komponentu. Uništavamo svijet i moramo ovo promijeniti. Mislim, realno u pravu su, ali šta da mi ovdje kao obični ljudi stvarno napravimo? Pa ovdje je ključna informacija. Prema Gene Sparksu, ljudima je već dana tehnologija koja može na pozitivan način transformirati ovaj svijet. I to u sklopu onog dogovora još iz 50. godina 20. stoljeća. Ali ljudi, to jest u ovom slučaju tadašnje vođe SAD-a i Sovjetskog saveza, kasnije i Kine, su odlučili ovu tehnologiju iskorištavati za naoružavanje. Te su ljudi bili ti koji su prekršili ovaj dogovor, jer jedan od dogovora je bio da se sa vremenom i otkrije njihovo postojanje. S obzirom da više nije bilo smisla pregovarati s ovakvom vrstom ljudi, počeli su dijeliti informacije običnim ljudima. I to dosta često u masovnim otmicama, poput one koju je danas opisao Gene Sparks. Te mu je jasno dano do znanja da nas se bez ikakvih problema, ako to oni požele, može maknuti i zamijeniti na Zemlji. I zato su godinama prikupljali naš genetski materijal, ali i sav drugi biološki materijal na Zemlji, poput sjemenja i biljki i životinja. Tako da imaju kolekciju poput genetske arke s kojom mogu replicirati ovaj život na Zemlji, ali bilo gdje drugdje i to na nekakvom drugom planetu ako to požele. Te nas se bez ikakvih problema može zamijeniti sa ovakvom vrstom hibrida ako za to bude bilo potrebe. Hibridi koji će živjeti u skladu sa prirodom i biti povezani s ovim bićima, jer ovakvi hibridi imaju puno veće psihičke moći. Ogroman broj detalja koji nikad prije nismo čuli. Mogli ste vidjeti tečnost u njegovom govoru, stoga se postavlja pitanje da li ovaj čovjek zaista govori istinu. S obzirom na sve što sam čuo i pročitao, njegova priča, a ne zaboravite, ova priča je starija od 30 godina, se u nevjerojatne detalje poklapa sa svim onim što do nas dolazi danas od zviždača. Ne mogu vam kao u ovom slučaju reći da je riječ o očitom lažovu, ali ono što vam mogu reći je da ovaj čovjek je stvarno uvjerljiv. Da li je povjerovao vlastite fantazije koje prepričava bez ikakvih problema ili priča iz stvarnog sjećanja, kao i uvijek procijenit ćete sami. Jer riječ je o nedokazivoj priči, ali svejedno sam mislio da zavrijeđuje da govorimo o njoj, jer rijetkost je da u toliko detalja netko govori o ovakvim stvarima. I od svega viđenog meni je čak bilo najinteresantnije, ako je ovo sve naravno istina, spoznaja da je kontakt barem s ovakvim bićima, znači ovakvom vrstom bića kako ga zanima većina ljudi, potpuno nemoguće. Ovo nije ekipa, to jest biološke radilice sa svojim gospodarima koji će doći i sjesti za stol s vama na jednu čakulu o znanosti i filozofiji. Komunikacija s njima je minimalna, nemaju osjećaj poput nas i ne sporazumijevaju se verbalno i potrebne su godine, znači godine vremena da se čovjek prilagodi na njihovu prisutnost i mentalnu komunikaciju. Jim Sparks je danas govorio o tome, trebalo mu je 6 godina da se donekle nauči na njih, ali čak ni tad nije mogao normalno komunicirati, nego je postalo samo podnošljivije. Stekao je toleranciju na njihovu energiju i lakše je podnosio mentalne poruke, ali čak ni tad nije komunicirao s njima kao sa drugim ljudima. I pitanje je da li je nešto ovako uopće moguće. Očito je dio komunikacije moguća, ali ona se odvija kao što je moguća komunikacija između čovjeka i psa. Nećete sa vašim psom raspravljati o postotku cementa koji ide u beton ili kako radi žar na nit u lampama. I pitanje je smo li mi uopće sposobni za više oblike komunikacije. Po ovom danas viđenom, danas u ovom trenutku nismo. Niti očito i oni imaju želju za ovakvim stvarima kad vide što se događa. I pitanje je ako su ovakve stvari istinite. Što će se dogoditi s ljudima? Jesmo li mi zastarjela serija koju će zamijeniti novi model? Na jednak način kao što smo mi zamijenili neandertalce. Ili će nas još uvijek neko vrijeme tolerirati u svrhu eksperimenata da vide možemo li preokrenuti ovu situaciju. Očito je da nas još uvijek toleriraju jer ne bi se ni trudili pokazivati ovakve stvari većem broju ljudi. Ali pitanje je do kad će sve ovo trajati jer čisto sumnjam da stvaraju sve ove ogromne količine hibrida da nemaju nikakav plan za njih. A da li ovaj plan uključuje infiltraciju ovih hibrida među običnu populaciju, što se već prema nekim ljudima i događa, kao nekakav način pripreme svijeta na ovakav način ili će nas u potpunosti zamijeniti, ostaje da vidimo. I na kraj krajeva koliko je vama ovaj čovjek uvjerljiv. I evo za sam kraj još jedna zanimljivost iz knjige i ostavit ću vam link na cijelu knjigu koga zanimaju baš svi detalji. U jednom od ovih susreta ova bića su Jim Sparku dala jedan mali dar, što dokazuje da unatoč zastrašujućoj pojavi, barem dio ovakvih bića ima dobre namjere. S obzirom da oni ne komuniciraju s nama na način kao što zamišljamo, jer oni ne pričaju puno, pokazali su ovom čovjeku jednu kutiju u kojoj se nalazila jedna smeđa, ljepljiva supstanca, te su pokretom ruke ovu kutiju približili njegovim prsima. Bilo je ovo gesta bez ikakvih riječi, bez ikakve poruke. I Jim Sparks smatra da je shvatio njezino značenje, te da je shvatio poruku ovog dara. Jer ovaj čovjek je bio teški pušač koji je godinama pušio ogromne količine cigara, te on smatra da je ovo bila gesta i njihov dar s kojim su uklonili tragove i oštećenja nastala dugogodišnjim pušenjem. Ovo su ovi sitni detalji unutar ove priče koji bi malo kome pali na pamet kada govorimo o nekakvim klasičnim fantazijama. Te su upravo ovakvi detalji zbog kojih je ova priča, barem meni, uvjerljiva. Ali ako smatrate da je čak i ovo jedan fantastičan detalj, naravno djeluje tako. Postoji knjiga Preston Deneta koja govori o čak 300 slučajeva kojima su ili bića ili NLO-i bili direktno zaslužni za nečije ozdravljenje. Fantazija ili ne, procijenite sami. Jer vi ste na Balkanju UFO kanalu, mjestu gdje istina ponekad zvuči čudnije od fikcije. Vidimo se uskoro opet. Lijep pozdrav!